The crystal chandelier at the Sovereign cast diamond-like reflections across Table 9, where Sophia Martinez's steady hands delivered a $300 bottle of Bordeaux without a tremble. What the guests didn't notice was how she expertly pivoted her 6-month pregnant belly away from the businessman whose wandering hand had already accidentally brushed her hip twice tonight. 28-year-old pregnant waitresses weren't supposed to notice these things. They were supposed to smile, serve, and be invisible. But Sophia had noticed everything since her first day 18 months ago. Every skimmed credit card, every altered receipt, every time Victor Hargrove's manicured fingers had adjusted a number that didn't need adjusting. "Another impeccable service, Miss Martinez," Mrs. Harrison murmured as Sophia topped off her water. The elderly woman had been coming to the Sovereign every Thursday for 20 years and always requested Sophia's section. "Though you should be resting those feet in your condition." "Just 6 more weeks until maternity leave," Sophia replied with a genuine smile, one of the few she had left these days. She strategically positioned the water pitcher to obscure her view of Victor, who stood at the host stand watching her with undisguised contempt. The grand dining room hummed with the particular music of wealth, the subtle clink of heavy silverware, the respectful murmur of business deals being closed, the almost imperceptible footfalls of staff trained to anticipate needs before they were expressed. The Sovereign Hotel had been the crown jewel of downtown for nearly a century, its restaurant boasting 3 Michelin stars and a 6-month waiting list. Sophia's black orthopedic shoes squeaked slightly against the marble floor. She made her way back to the service station. Her uniform, a crisp white shirt and floor-length black apron, had been tailored twice as her pregnancy progressed. The staff had collected money to cover the expense. Victor had made it clear such personal modifications weren't the hotel's concern. Table 12's card was declined, Marco, the bartender, whispered as she passed. His eyes, warm with concern, flickered toward the manager's office. "Victor ran it himself and told me it went through the second time, but the system didn't show the notification ping," Sophia finished for him, having noticed the missing confirmation sound. "And let me guess, he kept the original receipt?" Marco nodded almost imperceptibly. "He's getting careless." A flicker of movement caught Sophia's attention, Victor emerging from his office with a woman who definitely wasn't his wife. Vanessa Reeves stood 5'10" in her Louboutins, her chestnut hair falling in expensive waves around a face that had graced regional magazine covers. Sophia had seen her 3 times this week, always in closed-door meetings with Victor that left lipstick smudged on his collar. "May I present our new hospitality consultant," Victor announced to the gathered staff, his hand lingering at the small of Vanessa's back. "Miss Reeves comes to us with extensive experience in luxury service and will be observing all departments to implement improvements." Elena, the head chef for 20 years, didn't bother hiding her skeptical expression. "What experience exactly?" she asked, arms folded across her chest. Victor's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "Miss Reeves has consulted for several 5-star properties internationally. She'll begin by shadowing front-of-house staff to understand our current protocols." His gaze slid to Sophia, a calculation forming behind his eyes that made her instinctively rest a protective hand on her belly. Later, as she balanced dirty plates along her forearm with practiced ease, Sophia overheard Victor's voice drifting from the wine cellar. "It's perfect timing," he was saying, voice low but urgent. "The pregnant one has the best sections and highest tips. Once she's gone, you'll slide right into her position." "Are you sure you can just fire her?" Vanessa's voice bored and entitled. "Don't these places have laws about pregnant women or whatever?" Victor's laugh held no humor. "I've documented 3 customer complaints already. Fabricated, of course, but she won't be able to prove that. Trust me, by next week, you'll have her sections, her regulars, and her tips." The crystal wineglass in Sophia's hand trembled slightly, the only outward sign of her racing heart. She'd suspected Victor was corrupt with money, but this was different. This was her livelihood, her baby's future, the health insurance that covered her prenatal care. "Everything okay?" Elena appeared beside her, taking in Sophia's expression with a maternal concern that made her throat tighten. "Fine," Sophia whispered, straightening her shoulders. "Just tired." But that night, after her shift ended at 1 a.m., Sophia didn't go straight home to her small apartment with its second-hand crib still waiting to be assembled. Instead, she slipped into the business center and printed out her documentation of every discrepancy she'd noticed in the past 6 months, altered receipts, duplicate charges, inventory that arrived but was never logged, small amounts, never enough to trigger automatic alerts, but consistent enough to total nearly $200,000 by her calculations. She didn't notice the small red light blinking on the security camera above, or the fact that the footage was being reviewed in real time 7 floors up in a suite that didn't appear on the hotel's official floor plan. Dominic Russo watched the pregnant waitress gathering evidence with an expression that revealed nothing. At 53, his face had acquired the kind of lines that spoke of power rather than age, his salt and pepper hair cut with military precision, his custom suit probably worth more than most of his employees made in a month. "Interesting," he murmured, eyes never leaving the monitor. Marco Vannucci, his consigliere for 20 years, stood silently beside him. "Should we intervene?" "Not yet." Dominic's finger traced the rim of his whiskey glass, the only movement in his otherwise still demeanor. "I want to see what she does with it." Below, Sophia slipped the papers into her worn leather bag, her other hand resting protectively over the child that had no idea its future was balanced on its mother's courage. The night manager passed, nodding respectfully. Unaware that the woman he barely noticed and the man who owned not just this hotel, but the entire international chain, were now inextricably linked by the simple act of paying attention when others looked away. In the morning, Sophia arrived to find her schedule had been altered overnight. Her lucrative weekend section had been reassigned. In its place, Monday lunch, traditionally the slowest shift. "Problem?" Victor's voice was casual as he materialized beside her, cologne so heavy it made her already sensitive stomach roil. "This isn't my regular section," Sophia said quietly, keeping her voice level despite the panic rising in her chest. Monday lunch wouldn't cover her rent, let alone the mounting medical bills. "We're making adjustments," Victor replied, straightening his already perfect tie. "Vanessa will be taking some of your tables as part of her training." "I see." Sophia's hand instinctively moved to her belly, where her daughter kicked as if in protest. Victor's eyes followed the movement, his lip curling slightly. "The Sovereign projects a certain image, Miss Martinez. Our clients expect perfection." The implication hung in the air between them. Her growing body was an imperfection to be removed. "I have a doctor's appointment at 4, she said, instead of what she wanted to say. "It's been on the schedule for weeks." "That won't work with our new arrangement." Victor's smile never reached his eyes. "You'll need to reschedule. Vanessa requires afternoon training." As if summoned, Vanessa appeared, dressed in a uniform identical to Sophia's, but somehow making it look like runway fashion. "Ready for my first day," she purred, hand possessively linking with Victor's arm. "Perfect timing," Victor said. "Sophia was just heading to call her doctor to reschedule so she can train you this afternoon." Sophia felt a pressure building behind her eyes, but refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "I'll make it work," she said, voice steady despite everything inside her screaming in protest. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a carefully orchestrated nightmare. Regular customers who'd requested Sophia for months were told she was unavailable. Vanessa shadowed her constantly, making notes on her inefficiencies. Write-ups appeared in her file for infractions she hadn't committed. "Your service has declined significantly," Victor informed her during a staff meeting, pushing a customer comment card across the table. "This guest specifically mentioned feeling uncomfortable with your condition." Sophia scanned the card, recognizing the handwriting that matched Vanessa's notes. "This is fabricated," she said quietly. A hush fell over the room. Staff members looked down at their hands, unwilling to witness what was coming but unable to intervene. "Are you accusing me of falsifying records?" Victor's voice was dangerously soft. Elena started to speak, but Sophia cut her off with a small shake of her head. The older woman had 3 grandchildren to support. She couldn't risk her job, too. "I'm saying there are a lot of falsified records in this hotel," Sophia replied, reaching into her bag, "including these." She placed her documentation on the table, neat, organized evidence of months of financial discrepancies. For a moment, Victor's mask slipped, revealing something ugly beneath his polished exterior. Then he laughed, the sound brittle in the silent room. "Pregnancy hormones have clearly affected your judgment," he said, not bothering to look at the papers. Security will escort you to clear out your locker. You can't fire me for being pregnant, Sophia said, her voice surprisingly calm as two security guards appeared in the doorway. That's discrimination. I'm firing you for making false accusations against management and creating a hostile work environment. Victor gathered her documentation, folding it with deliberate casualness. Your final paycheck will be mailed after we determine if any charges need to be deducted for missing inventory. The humiliation burned worse than the injustice. Victor orchestrated Sophia's exit through the main lobby during peak check-in time, security flanking her as though she were a criminal. Guests turned to stare as she was marched across the gleaming marble floor, her small box of possessions clutched against her belly like a shield. This is unnecessary, she said quietly to the younger guard, whose discomfort was evident in his averted gaze. I'm 6 months pregnant. Where exactly do you think I'm running to? Just following orders, ma'am, he mumbled. Mr. Hargrove insisted on standard termination protocol. Standard protocol didn't explain why Victor and Vanessa stood watching from the grand staircase, their matching expressions of false sympathy visible to every arriving guest. This wasn't just termination, it was public execution of her reputation. Sophia, Mrs. Harrison's shocked voice cut through the hushed whispers. The elderly woman rose from her usual armchair in the lobby, elegant even in her confusion. What on earth is happening? Before Sophia could respond, Victor appeared at the woman's elbow. An unfortunate personnel matter, Mrs. Harrison, he said smoothly. Nothing for you to concern yourself with. Your usual table is ready whenever you are. Mrs. Harrison looked between them, her eyes sharp despite her 82 years. I've been coming to this hotel since before you were born, young man. I believe I'll decide what concerns me. She stepped toward Sophia, but Victor smoothly inserted himself between them. Perhaps you'd like to speak with our new hospitality director? Miss Reeves has some exciting changes planned for our longtime guests. Vanessa materialized with practiced timing, her smile professionally sympathetic as she guided the protesting Mrs. Harrison away. The lobby's vaulted ceiling suddenly felt suffocating to Sophia, its Renaissance murals of gods and angels looking down with painted indifference. Outside the revolving doors, rain had begun to fall, because of course it would rain today of all days. Your final paperwork, the head of security said stiffly, handing her an envelope. Your key card has been deactivated. As the guards retreated, Victor approached, maintaining careful public distance. I'll need the documentation you presented at the meeting, he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. Those are confidential hotel records. They're copies, Sophia replied, equally quiet, and they're evidence of fraud. Something dangerous flashed behind Victor's eyes. Be very careful. Miss Martinez, single mothers with no income don't fare well making accusations against respected businesses. It would be unfortunate if your allegations affected your employability elsewhere. The threat was unmistakable. Sophia felt her daughter kick, a fierce reminder of what was at stake. You can take my job, she said, straightening to her full height despite the ache in her lower back, but that's all you get from me. As she pushed through the revolving door into the rain, Sophia didn't see the distinguished silver-haired man watching from the VIP lounge behind the one-way glass partition. She didn't notice how his eyes narrowed at Victor's smug expression or the way his hand tightened around his tumbler of scotch. Dominic Russo had built his empire on noticing details others missed, and right now, every detail about this situation felt wrong. Marco, he said quietly, and his consigliere stepped forward from the shadows. I want everything on Victor Hargrove, bank records, personal history, every skeleton, every debt, and find out where Miss Martinez lives. We already have the background check you ordered last week, Marco replied, sliding a slim folder across the table. Basic details on the waitress. Dominic scanned the file, his expression unreadable. 28 years old, no family in the state, 6 months pregnant with a girl. Father not in the picture, excellent employee record until 2 weeks ago. This tells me facts, Dominic said, closing the folder. It doesn't tell me who she is. Marco raised an eyebrow, the closest he ever came to questioning his boss. Does it matter? She's just a waitress. Dominic's gaze returned to the lobby, where Victor was now laughing with Vanessa, his hand lingering possessively at her waist. It matters, he said simply. The rain had soaked through Sophia's thin jacket by the time she reached the bus stop, her cardboard box of personal items already disintegrating at the edges. She'd worked at the Sovereign for 18 months, and all she had to show for it was a box of lotion samples from the hotel spa, a spare pair of compression socks, and a notebook full of evidence no one would believe. She struggled onto the crowded bus, ignoring the stairs as water dripped from her hair onto the worn vinyl seat. The ride to her apartment in the East Side would take 45 minutes in this weather. 45 minutes to figure out how to make rent, how to find health care, how to bring a child into the world with nothing but determination and dwindling savings. Across town, in a penthouse office suite overlooking the city skyline, Dominic Russo reviewed security footage from the Sovereign's cameras. Not the standard feeds that hotel security monitored, but his private system that captured every corner of his properties. He had built his empire from nothing, and he maintained it by knowing everything that happened within his domain. "Freeze there," he instructed his security chief, pointing to a frame showing Victor slipping something into his pocket at the register. Timestamp? 3:42 p.m. Tuesday. That's the third incident this week. Dominic's expression remained neutral, but those who knew him recognized the dangerous stillness. "And this?" He gestured to another screen showing Victor and Vanessa in what appeared to be an intimate encounter in the wine cellar. "That's last Friday. Based on his wife's social media, she was at their daughter's dance recital." The credit card skimming? "At least 40 instances documented over the past 3 months. Conservative estimate puts it at around 50,000, but likely more." Dominic nodded, absorbing the information without visible reaction. "And Miss Martinez's documentation?" His security chief handed him a folder. "She's thorough. Dates, amounts, account numbers. She's been tracking his activities for months. Why didn't she report it sooner?" "Medical bills," Marco interjected, entering with another file. "Her younger brother had leukemia, passed away 6 months ago. She needed the health insurance for her pregnancy and was afraid of losing it if she caused trouble." Dominic's expression softened imperceptibly. "And the baby's father?" "Ex-boyfriend. Left when she told him about the pregnancy. No contact since." For several moments, Dominic was silent, reviewing the evidence before him with the same intensity he'd used to build his business empire, piece by piece, detail by detail. "Victor Hargrove has been stealing from me for nearly a year," he finally said, voice deceptively calm. "He's been skimming from registers, double-charging guests, and manipulating inventory. And when someone noticed, he used her pregnancy as an excuse to discredit and remove her." No one spoke. They knew this tone, the quiet before a decision that would irrevocably alter someone's future. "This ends now," Dominic continued, closing the folder with deliberate precision. "But not in our usual way." Marco looked surprised. "Sir?" "The old methods stay in the old country," Dominic replied, standing to straighten his already immaculate suit. "This requires a different approach, one that makes a statement not just to Victor, but to everyone who works for me." He turned to the window, watching rain lash against the glass, thinking of the pregnant woman he'd watched being humiliated in his lobby. "Arrange a meeting with Miss Martinez. Tomorrow." "And Victor?" Dominic's reflection in the glass revealed nothing of his thoughts, but his words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Let him enjoy his victory tonight. By tomorrow evening, he won't have a career left in this city, or any other." 3 days later, Sophia sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills and rejection emails. Her phone call to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission had resulted in a promise to look into it that held little hope. 5 job applications had yielded nothing. Victor's influence in the hospitality community apparently reached further than she had anticipated. The baby kicked, a persistent reminder that time was running out. Her health insurance would lapse at the end of the month. The refrigerator contained eggs, half a gallon of milk, and prenatal vitamins. The apartment felt smaller than ever, walls closing in with each passing hour. The second-hand crib remained unassembled in the corner, a monument to hope deferred. She'd spent the morning alternating between calling potential employers and fighting waves of nausea that her doctor had assured her should have subsided by now. "Just hang in there, little one," she whispered, rubbing circles on her belly. "We'll figure something out." But the stack of past due notices told a different story. Without the sovereign's health insurance, her next prenatal appointment would cost more than she had in her checking account. The irony wasn't lost on her. The very life growing inside her had been the excuse Victor needed to push her out. A sharp knock at the door startled her. Standing, she peered through the peephole to find a man in an expensive suit holding an umbrella against the continuing rain. Behind him, a black Bentley idled at the curb. "Ms. Martinez?" The man's voice was polite but impersonal. "My name is Marco Venucci. I represent someone who would like to speak with you regarding your recent termination from the Sovereign." Sophia's heart skipped. "From HR? Are they reconsidering?" A small smile touched the man's lips. "Not exactly. My employer has a proposition that might interest you." "Your employer?" Suspicion replaced hope. "Who exactly is your employer?" "Someone who believes you've been treated unjustly," Marco replied. "Someone with the power to correct that injustice." Sophia's hand went protectively to her belly. "I don't need charity." "This isn't charity, Ms. Martinez. It's business." He handed her a business card, heavy stock with only a name embossed in simple type. Dominic Russo. The name meant nothing to her. "Why would a complete stranger care about my situation?" "Because Mr. Russo doesn't appreciate dishonesty in his establishments," Marco said with careful emphasis on the last word. "And the Sovereign is his establishment." Sophia's mind raced to process this information. He owns the Sovereign, but the hotel is part of Royal Hospitality Group, which is a subsidiary of Russo International. Marco's patience remained intact, but his posture suggested he wasn't accustomed to extended doorstep conversations. "Mr. Russo would like 15 minutes of your time. His car's waiting." Rain continued to fall on the cracked concrete steps of her apartment building. Behind Marco, the gleaming Bentley looked as out of place as a spaceship. "I don't get in cars with strangers," Sophia said finally. Marco nodded as though he'd expected this. "Mr. Russo anticipated your caution. He's waiting at the cafe on the corner. Public place, lots of witnesses, 15 minutes, and if you're not interested in what he has to say, we'll never bother you again." Sophia glanced back at her kitchen table with its pile of final notices and rejection letters. What did she have to lose? "Let me get my coat," she said. The cafe on the corner was nothing special, a narrow storefront with mismatched furniture and chalkboard menus. But when Sophia stepped inside, shaking rain from her umbrella, she immediately noticed how empty it was. No lunchtime rush, no students with laptops, just a barista polishing glassware with unusual attention and a silver-haired man in the far corner booth. Dominic Russo didn't stand when she approached. His dark eyes assessed her with the same attention he might give a balance sheet or investment property. Clinical, thorough, missing nothing. Up close, she could see the precision in everything about him, from his perfectly knotted tie to the way his fingers rested lightly on the ceramic mug before him. "Miss Martinez." His voice was quiet but carried an undercurrent of authority that made the single barista disappear into the back room without a word. "Thank you for coming." Sophia slid into the booth opposite him, her pregnant belly making the maneuver less graceful than she would have liked. Your associate didn't leave much room for refusal. The corner of Dominic's mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile. Marco can be persuasive. Is that what you call it? Sophia's exhaustion had burned away her usual caution. Look, I don't know what this is about, but if Victor sent you to threaten me about the documentation, Victor Hargrove doesn't send me anywhere. The flatness in Dominic's tone halted her words instantly. I own the Sovereign Hotel, along with 37 others across 3 continents. Sophia's hands instinctively cradled her belly, a protective gesture that hadn't escaped Dominic's notice. Then I should be talking to your HR department about wrongful termination. That would be the traditional approach. Dominic pushed an untouched cup of tea toward her. Chamomile, no caffeine. The presumption that he knew what she should be drinking irritated her almost as much as his calm assessment. I didn't come here for tea. No. You came because you have no job, dwindling savings, and a child on the way. His bluntness was startling after weeks of Victor's slick manipulations. And because someone promised you justice. Did they? Sophia held his gaze. Because so far, all I've gotten is cryptic messages and herbal tea. For a moment, something like approval flickered in Dominic's expression. "Victor Hargrove has been stealing from my hotel for approximately 14 months, he said, sliding a leather portfolio across the table. "Credit card skimming, inventory manipulation, double billing guests. Based on our preliminary audit, the total exceeds $380,000. The number was nearly double what Sophia had calculated. She opened the portfolio to find photographs, spreadsheets, transaction records, an investigation far more comprehensive than her handwritten notes. "You knew. It wasn't a question." "I suspected," Dominic corrected. "Large organizations develop blind spots. I was aware something was happening at the Sovereign, but not who or how extensive. Until me. Until you." He nodded once. "The pregnant waitress who noticed what my financial controllers missed." Sophia continued flipping through pages, recognizing patterns she'd documented herself. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Victor Hargrove didn't just steal from my company. He stole from my guests. He stole from my employees. He corrupted my establishment." Each sentence carried increasing weight. "And when someone had the courage to stand against him, he destroyed her livelihood and threatened her future." A chill ran through Sophia despite the cafe's warmth. Outside, rain streamed down the windows, distorting the world beyond into watery shapes. "What do you want from me?" "Initially, your documentation to complete my case against him." Dominic's eyes never left her face. "But I've been watching you, Miss Martinez. Not just your confrontation with Victor, but how you interact with guests, how staff respond to you, how you notice things others miss." The realization that she'd been under surveillance made her skin crawl. "That's invasive. That's business." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "I didn't build what I have by ignoring talent, regardless of where I find it." "Talent?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "I'm an unemployed waitress with a GED and a baby on the way." "You're an observant woman with natural leadership abilities and an ironclad sense of justice. The kind of person who documents fraud for months instead of looking the other way." Dominic leaned forward slightly. "The kind of person I want managing my hotel." The words hung in the air between them. Sophia felt her daughter kick, as if registering her own shock. "That's absurd," she finally managed. "I have no management experience." "Experience can be acquired. Integrity is innate." Dominic's tone made it clear this wasn't a debate, but a statement of fact. "Victor will be removed tomorrow. I need someone who understands the operation from the ground up to oversee the transition. Someone like the waitress he just publicly humiliated." The skepticism in her voice couldn't be contained. "The staff would never accept that. They already respect you more than they ever respected him." Dominic stood, buttoning his immaculate suit jacket with a single fluid movement. "Consider it overnight. Marco will contact you in the morning for your decision." "And if I say no?" Dominic paused, studying her with an unreadable expression. "Then I prosecute Victor using the evidence we've gathered. You receive a generous severance for your documentation, and we never have this conversation again." He placed a business card on the table. Heavy stock, minimalist design, just a phone number. "But you won't say no, Miss Martinez. You seem very confident about that." "I am." His certainty wasn't arrogance, but simple acknowledgement of reality. "Because you didn't spend 6 months documenting fraud just to walk away when given the chance to fix it." With that, he was gone, leaving Sophia alone with a cooling cup of tea and a proposition that seemed equal parts absurd and inevitable. Across town, Victor Hargrove was having the best day of his professional life. The regional director had called personally to commend his handling of the pregnancy situation, citing potential liability issues had the waitress been allowed to continue. Vanessa had settled seamlessly into Sophia's sections, her tips already exceeding projections. And Mrs. Harrison, after some initial resistance, had finally accepted that her favorite server wouldn't be returning. "Another successful service," he announced to the afternoon staff, champagne flute raised in the empty dining room. "Vanessa's integration has been flawless. I knew we needed a change of energy around here." The staff's scattered applause lacked enthusiasm, but Victor didn't notice. Elena stood at the back, arms crossed, her normally warm eyes cold as she watched the celebration. "Quite the victory lap," she muttered to Marco, the bartender. Enjoy it while it lasts, Marco replied, his voice barely audible. Word is there's a surprise audit tomorrow. Upstairs, in the hidden security suite, Dominic watched the scene unfold on his monitors, fingers steepled before him. Behind him, Marco Vannucci waited silently for instructions. He's getting sloppy, Dominic observed as Victor pocketed a guest's credit card while processing payment. Too confident. The evidence is conclusive, Marco confirmed. Financial crimes, sexual harassment, labor violations. We could have him arrested tonight. No. Dominic's gaze remained fixed on the screen. I want this handled differently, more visibly. Marco raised an eyebrow. That's unusual for you, boss. These are unusual circumstances. Dominic turned from the monitors. Has Miss Martinez's background check been completed? Yes, nothing concerning. Brother died of leukemia 6 months ago. Parents deceased, worked multiple jobs through high school, perfect credit until the medical bills. The pregnancy was unplanned. Boyfriend left when he found out. Dominic nodded, absorbing the information. And the documentation she kept? Meticulous. Dates, times, amounts. She even noted which guests were affected. For a moment, Dominic was silent, his mind working through variables and outcomes as he had done countless times in building his empire. But this felt different. This wasn't just business. Prepare the paperwork, he finally said. If she accepts, I want everything ready. And if she doesn't? Dominic's expression revealed nothing. She will. In her small apartment, Sophia sat surrounded by her evidence, pages of notes documenting months of Victor's fraud. Her brother Tommy had encouraged her to keep recording everything, even when her pregnancy made the long hours more difficult. It's like Dad always said, Tommy had whispered from his hospital bed, thin fingers squeezing hers. The truth always matters, Soph, even when no one's listening. Tommy had been gone for 6 months now, the leukemia finally winning after 3 years of fight. But his voice still guided her decisions. What would he say about Dominic Russo's offer? A mafia boss, because she wasn't naive enough to believe he was just a businessman, offering her a management position. It sounded like the setup to a bad joke. The baby kicked, a series of insistent movements against her ribs. I know, little one, Sophia murmured, rubbing circles on her belly. I'm thinking. Victor had taken everything, her income, her health care, her professional reputation, but he hadn't taken her integrity. Was aligning with someone like Dominic Russo worth the chance to reclaim what she'd lost, to expose Victor's corruption? Her phone vibrated with an incoming text, an unknown number, but the message was clear. The paperwork is prepared, your decision by 9 a.m. Sophia looked around her small apartment, the unpaid bills on the table, the unassembled crib in the corner, the future narrowing with each passing day. She thought of Victor's smug face as he'd watched her march through the lobby. She thought of Mrs. Harrison's confused expression. She thought of the other employees still under Victor's thumb. The truth always matters, even when no one's listening. But what if, for once, someone was? The morning sun broke through 3 days of rain as Sophia Martinez walked through the revolving doors of the Sovereign Hotel. Her black dress was the only professional outfit that still fit her pregnant frame, but she'd paired it with a blazer borrowed from a neighbor and the quiet confidence of someone with nothing left to lose. The lobby fell silent as she crossed the marble floor, the click of her sensible heels echoing against the vaulted ceiling. Gone were the security guards who had escorted her out in humiliation. In their place stood Marco Vannucci, hands clasped before him, and 3 men in suits who radiated the distinct energy of people accustomed to solving problems efficiently. At the reception desk, Victor Hargrove was reviewing reservations with Vanessa, his hand casually resting at the small of her back. He didn't notice Sophia's entrance until the unusual silence registered, and when he looked up, the color drained from his face. Miss Martinez, he said, recovering quickly, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. You're no longer employed here. That's correct, Sophia replied, her voice carrying across the hushed lobby. I'm not employed here. As of this morning, I manage here. Victor's laugh was immediate but hollow, his eyes darting to the security team who made no move to intervene. That's absurd. You can't just walk in and... Miss Martinez is the Sovereign's new executive manager, effective immediately. The voice came from behind her, smooth and authoritative. Dominic Russo stepped from the elevator, his presence transforming the energy of the room. Staff members straightened instinctively. Guests paused mid-conversation. Even the potted palms seemed to lean away from his path as he crossed to where Sophia stood. "Mr. Hargrove," Dominic continued, "your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." Victor's face cycled through shock, confusion, and finally desperate anger. "You can't do this. You don't have the authority. I report to the regional director of Royal Hospitality Group." "Who reports to the CEO?" Dominic said calmly. "Who reports to the board, which I chair. Royal Hospitality Group is a subsidiary of Russo International." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a register only Victor could hear. "You've been stealing from me, Victor. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" The color that had drained from Victor's face returned as a mottled flush. "These are baseless accusations. I have impeccable financial records." "Yes, you kept 2 sets. Dominic nodded to Marco, who produced a leather portfolio. "We have both versions, along with footage of you skimming credit cards, documentation of your fraudulent billing, and statements from vendors about your kickback arrangements." Victor's gaze darted to Sophia, hatred flashing in his eyes. "This is her doing. She's been making ridiculous claims for weeks. Pregnancy hormones have affected her judgment." "Actually," Sophia said quietly, "it was your judgment that failed. You were so busy watching for external threats, you never considered that the owner might be watching you." For a moment, the only sound in the lobby was the gentle splash of the marble fountain. Then Dominic turned to address the gathered staff, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "The Sovereign Hotel represents a standard of excellence that extends beyond its amenities to the integrity of its operation. Ms. Martinez will be implementing changes effective immediately to restore that standard. Your cooperation is expected and your input valued." He turned to Victor, all warmth vanishing from his tone. "You have 15 minutes to collect your belongings. After that, this matter moves from a private termination to a public legal case." As security moved toward Victor, Vanessa tried to slip away, but Sophia stepped into her path. "Miss Reeves," she said with professional courtesy that belied the steel beneath, "your consulting contract has also been terminated. Please surrender your keycard before leaving." The look Vanessa gave her could have frozen flame, but she silently dropped the card on the marble floor between them instead of handing it over. One final petty power move. Without a word, she turned and walked out the front entrance, designer heels clicking a staccato rhythm of retreat. Victor wasn't as dignified. "This is a mistake," he hissed as security flanked him. "I have connections. I know people. You think you can just walk in here and take over? You're nothing but a waitress, a pregnant, uneducated waitress." Dominic stepped forward, but Sophia placed a gentle hand on his arm, a gesture not lost on the watching staff. "You're right about one thing, Victor," she said, her voice steady. "I was a waitress, which means I learned to clean up messes far bigger than you." As security led him toward the elevator, Elena emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She took in the scene with shrewd eyes before breaking into the first genuine smile Sophia had seen in weeks. "About time," the chef said, nodding to Sophia. "Staff meeting in 10 minutes?" "Make it 15, Sophia replied. "I need to review the schedules first." As the lobby gradually returned to normal, Dominic guided Sophia toward the management office, Victor's former domain with its pretentious mahogany desk and golf trophies. "First order of business," he said once they were alone, "is replacing this furniture. It doesn't suit you." Sophia ran her hand along the desk's polished surface, still processing the morning's events. "This is insane, you know that? 24 hours ago I was unemployed. Now I'm managing a luxury hotel." "You were managing it already," Dominic said matter-of-factly, "just without the title or compensation. The staff won't accept this, not immediately. They already respect you more than they ever respected him. The rest will come with time." Dominic moved to the window overlooking the courtyard. "There's a comprehensive audit beginning today. Financial, operational, personnel. I need someone who understands this hotel from the ground up to guide that process." "And that's me? The pregnant waitress?" "That's you. The woman who documented fraud for 6 months while working double shifts. The woman who stood up to Victor despite having everything to lose." Dominic turned to face her. I didn't build what I have by ignoring talent or courage when I find it. Sophia sank into the leather chair behind the desk, suddenly overwhelmed. I don't know the first thing about hotel management. You know people, you know service, you know integrity. Dominic's certainty was unwavering. The rest is paperwork and procedures, which can be learned. Beyond the office windows, she could see staff gathering in the dining room for the meeting she'd soon lead. Elena was already there, arms crossed but eyes hopeful. Marco, the bartender, was setting up coffee service. The Romanian housekeeper who'd helped hide Sophia's morning sickness was arranging chairs. "Why me?" she finally asked. "Really, you could bring in professional management with actual experience. Why trust something this valuable to someone like me?" Dominic was silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned against the desk, close enough that only she could hear his response. "Because 30 years ago, I was a dishwasher in a restaurant very much like this one. I watched the owner skim from servers' tips, shortchange vendors, exploit workers who couldn't afford to lose their jobs." His voice carried no emotion, just stated facts. "I promised myself that if I ever built something of my own, it would be different." Understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes. And somewhere along the way, that changed. "Power creates distance," he acknowledged. "Distance creates blind spots. Victor Hargrove happened in my blind spot." Dominic straightened, professional demeanor returning. "You don't have blind spots yet, Miss Martinez. You see everything from the ground up." The baby kicked, a series of insistent movements against Sophia's ribs, as if adding her own endorsement to the plan. "All right," she said, standing to her full height. "But we do this my way. Complete transparency with staff, fair wages, no more systemic issues swept under imported rugs." Dominic's expression might have been a smile on anyone else. "I wouldn't expect anything less." As she walked into the dining room to address her former colleagues, now her staff, Sophia felt the weight of their scrutiny. There was confusion, skepticism, even resentment from some quarters. But beneath it all ran a current of cautious hope. "Good morning," she began, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "As you've gathered, there have been some significant changes in management. I know you have questions. I'll answer all of them honestly." Elena stepped forward, arms still crossed. "Is it true? About Victor stealing?" Sophia nodded. "Yes, and worse. But that ends today." "And him?" The chef nodded toward Dominic, who stood quietly at the back of the room, observing. "What's his role in all this?" All eyes turned to the imposing figure who owned not just this hotel, but an international empire built in shadows. For a moment, Sophia wondered the same thing herself. What exactly had she agreed to? What unspoken expectations came with this unlikely alliance? But as her gaze met Dominic's across the room, she saw something unexpected, not calculation or control, but a quiet certainty that she would find her own answers, her own path. "Mr. Russo owns the Sovereign," she said simply. "I run it. Everything else, we'll figure out together." And in that moment, standing before the staff who had witnessed her humiliation just days ago, Sophia Martinez felt something shift inside her, not just the baby repositioning, but the weight of doubt giving way to the unfamiliar lightness of possibility. 3 months transformed the Sovereign beyond recognition. Not in its marble floors or crystal chandeliers, those remained as impeccable as ever. The change lived in the energy that pulsed through the hotel, a current of purpose that connected every employee from dishwashers to concierge. Sophia stood in the center of the grand dining room, her pregnancy now in its final month, reviewing preparations for the evening service. Her black maternity dress had been tailored to maintain the professional appearance the Sovereign demanded, but she'd paired it with comfortable flats that Elena had insisted upon. "The Wellington tables need to be repositioned," she noted to Thomas, the newly promoted floor manager. "Mrs. Harrison mentioned her friend uses a wheelchair now. Let's ensure they have the most accessible path." Thomas nodded, making notes with the same attention to detail Sophia had once shown as a waitress. He'd been a busboy under Victor's regime, invisible, undervalued, despite his business degree and natural leadership abilities. "Reservations are up 60% from last quarter," he reported, "and staff turnover is down to nearly 0. Because people actually want to work here now," Elena interjected, emerging from the kitchen with a sample of the evening's special. Try this. The baby needs proper nutrition. Sophia accepted the offered spoon, a wild mushroom risotto with white truffle, and closed her eyes at the burst of flavor. Perfection, as always. The kitchen staff actually has time to perfect dishes now that we're properly staffed, Elena said with pointed emphasis. The additional positions Sophia had created, over the objections of the financial department, had initially seemed extravagant. 3 months later, the improved service quality had more than justified the expense. "Have we heard from Mr. Russo today?" Thomas asked, his casual tone not quite masking his curiosity. Sophia glanced toward the entrance where Marco Vannucci stood with practiced nonchalance, his presence a reminder of the invisible hand that still guided the sovereign, however lightly. "He's implementing our model at the Chicago property this week," she replied. What she didn't add was that she'd spent 2 hours on the phone with Dominic at midnight, guiding him through the staffing changes needed for the transition. Their working relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a partnership of complementary perspectives, his broad vision balanced by her ground-level insights. The sovereign model, as the business press had begun calling it, was revolutionizing Dominic's entire hotel chain. Fair wages, transparent accounting, advancement opportunities based on merit rather than connections. The industry had initially scoffed, then watched in shock as both profits and customer satisfaction scores climbed steadily upward. "Miss Martinez," Marco approached with the careful precision that characterized all his movements. "There's a situation that requires your attention." Something in his tone made Sophia straighten. "The dining room is yours, Thomas," she said, following Marco toward the lobby. The situation materialized in the form of a health inspector, 2 tax auditors, and a Labor Department representative, all clustered near reception with identical expressions of bureaucratic determination. "Surprise inspection," the lead auditor announced, his tone suggesting he expected resistance. "We've received anonymous complaints about financial irregularities." Sophia recognized the maneuver instantly. Victor's fingerprints were all over this coordinated assault. He'd tried similar tactics twice before. "Of course," she said with professional courtesy that revealed nothing of her racing heart. "We welcome any opportunity to demonstrate our compliance. Marco, please provide our guests with the conference room and whatever refreshments they require. I'll gather the requested documentation." The inspection team exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for cooperation. As they followed Marco, Sophia caught a glimpse of a familiar figure watching from across the street. Victor, his expensive suit now slightly rumpled, his expression a mixture of anticipation and malice. In her office, no longer Victor's pretentious domain but a space of streamlined efficiency, Sophia pressed her palm against her lower back, trying to ease the persistent ache that had intensified since morning. The doctor had warned about stress affecting her blood pressure, but there was nothing to be done. Victor had timed this attack perfectly, knowing Dominic was in Chicago and she was days from delivery. Her phone vibrated with an incoming text. Holding up. Dominic, somehow aware of the situation despite being 2,000 miles away. "Nothing we can't handle," she replied, then added, "But he's escalating." The response came immediately. "I'm on my way back. Stall them until tomorrow." Sophia set down the phone, a wave of dizziness washing over her. The baby kicked forcefully, as if registering protest at her increasing stress levels. She'd been experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions for days, but this felt different, a persistent tightening that refused to ease. "Need help?" Elena stood in the doorway, concern etched in her features. "You look pale." "I'm fine," Sophia lied, straightening the financial records she'd need to present. "Just tired." Elena's skeptical expression made it clear she wasn't convinced. "The auditors, or whatever they are, have set up camp. Marco's keeping them occupied with paperwork and espresso." "Good. We have nothing to hide." Sophia managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Victor's hoping they'll find the same creative accounting he practiced. He doesn't understand what we've built here." The chief auditor spent 6 hours combing through financial records with increasing frustration as each system proved impeccable. The health inspector found nothing but perfect compliance. The labor representative interviewed staff who spoke glowingly of the workplace transformation. By evening, Sophia had guided the entire inspection team through every department, maintaining professional composure despite the increasing discomfort radiating across her abdomen. As the last auditor departed with grudging approval, she finally allowed herself to sink into her office chair, a trembling hand pressed against her belly. "They found nothing because there's nothing to find," Marco observed from the doorway. "This time," Sophia acknowledged, "but Victor won't stop. This was just the beginning." Marco studied her with the penetrating assessment that made him so valuable to Dominic. "You should be at home, resting. The baby is fine," she interrupted, though the sheen of perspiration on her forehead suggested otherwise. "I need to prepare for tomorrow's hospitality conference. Victor will be there." Marco's eyebrow lifted slightly. "You're still planning to attend? In your condition?" Sophia met his gaze with the quiet determination that had carried her through the past 3 months. "Especially in my condition. Victor used my pregnancy as a weapon against me. I won't let him use my absence as one now." Later that night, as rain once again lashed against the windows of her new apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom provided as part of her compensation package, Sophia reviewed her presentation for the Chicago Hospitality Association's annual conference. Ethical reform in luxury hospitality would introduce the sovereign model to the industry's most influential leaders. Her phone rang at precisely midnight, Dominic's customary check-in time. "The inspection team found nothing," she reported without preamble, "but Victor was watching from across the street. He's planning something bigger." "I'm aware," Dominic replied, his voice carrying the slight edge that emerged when his business interests were threatened. "He's been meeting with investors, spreading rumors about my background, suggesting the changes at the Sovereign are a front for money laundering." Sophia closed her eyes, another wave of discomfort washing through her. "He's desperate." "He's dangerous," Dominic corrected. "Desperation makes men unpredictable. I've moved my return flight to tonight. I'll be there for the conference tomorrow." There was something in his tone, a protective concern that extended beyond business interests. Over the past 3 months, their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated. Not romantic. There were boundaries neither was prepared to cross, but a partnership built on mutual respect and complementary strengths. "I can handle Victor," Sophia said, shifting to find a more comfortable position as another pain radiated across her abdomen. "I'm not concerned about Victor," Dominic replied, and she could hear the subtle smile in his voice. "I'm concerned about the fact that you're clearly in early labor and still planning to deliver a keynote address." Sophia froze. "How did you? You've been pausing every 7 minutes to breathe through contractions. Your speech patterns change slightly with each one." The matter-of-fact assessment was pure Dominic, observant, precise, missing nothing. "I'm fine," she insisted, though the increasing intensity of the contractions suggested otherwise. "Of course you are," he agreed, no trace of patronization in his tone. "And you'll deliver your presentation tomorrow as planned, but my plane lands at 6 a.m., and you will allow Marco to drive you to the conference instead of taking a taxi." It wasn't a request. Sophia found herself smiling despite the discomfort. 3 months ago, she would have bristled at the presumption. Now she recognized it for what it was, not control but concern, filtered through Dominic's particular lens of efficiency. "Deal," she conceded, but only because Marco's a better driver. After they disconnected, Sophia moved to the window, watching rain trace patterns against the glass. Below, the city continued its nighttime rhythm, unaware of the quiet revolution being born in its midst, one that would begin with a luxury hotel and spread throughout an industry long overdue for transformation. Another contraction gripped her, stronger than before. Her daughter kicked vigorously, as if eager to join the battle ahead. Tomorrow would bring confrontation with Victor, public scrutiny of the sovereign model, and the culmination of 3 months' work. All while she stood on the precipice of motherhood, her body preparing for its own profound transformation. "Just a little longer, little one," she whispered, one hand cradling her belly while the other gathered her presentation notes. "We have one more thing to finish before you arrive." The grand ballroom of the Palmer House buzzed with the particular energy of power and flux. 500 hospitality executives in tailored suits clustered in groups defined by invisible hierarchies, luxury brands separate from mid-tier chains, independents orbiting the edges, seeking connections. On the surface, it was a standard industry conference, but undercurrents of tension rippled through the crowd, all eyes occasionally drifting toward the entrance. Everyone had heard rumors about the sovereign transformation, about the pregnant manager who had revolutionized one of the city's oldest luxury properties, about profits increasing alongside employee retention and customer satisfaction, a trinity long considered impossible in their industry. When Sophia finally entered, the subtle shift in energy was palpable. Her tailored black maternity dress projected professional authority despite her advanced pregnancy. But it was her calm confidence that commanded attention, the quiet assurance of someone who had discovered her own power and grown comfortable wielding it. Marco shadowed her at a respectful distance, his vigilant presence a reminder of who ultimately stood behind the sovereign's transformation. And 3 steps behind Marco walked Dominic Russo himself, his entrance causing a ripple of whispers through the crowd. Most knew him only by reputation and corporate filing documents. Few had ever seen him at an industry function. "You're at 8 minutes apart," Dominic murmured as he drew alongside Sophia. "The presentation is scheduled for 40 minutes. Mathematically problematic." Sophia suppressed a smile, despite the discomfort radiating across her abdomen. "I've condensed it to 30. I'll manage." "Of course you will." His absolute certainty was oddly comforting. They were halfway across the ballroom when Victor Hargrove materialized before them, his smile tight and artificial. 3 months had not been kind to him. His designer suit hung slightly loose. His complexion carried the gray undertone of sustained stress. "Sophia," he said, voice pitched to carry to nearby listeners. "How maternal you look. Shouldn't you be on bed rest by now?" "Victor." She acknowledged him with professional courtesy that revealed nothing of the contraction currently tightening across her abdomen. "I'm surprised they let you in without a company affiliation." His smile hardened. "Temporary setback. I've been consulting for several properties interested in more traditional management approaches." His gaze shifted to Dominic, recognition and hatred flashing before he masked it with forced cordiality. "Mr. Russo, rare to see you at these functions. Usually you prefer to remain behind the scenes." "Circumstances evolve," Dominic replied, his tone conveying nothing but mild interest, "as do business models." Victor's laugh held no humor. "Yes, I've heard all about your revolutionary approach. Fascinating how it coincided with certain inquiries into your other business interests." The implied threat hung in the air between them. Sophia felt Dominic tense beside her, though his expression remained impassive. "If you'll excuse us," she interjected smoothly, "we need to prepare for the keynote." As they moved away, Victor called after them, voice pitched just loud enough to reach nearby executives. "I do hope your presentation covers the legitimate sources of the sovereign's sudden financial turnaround, Sophia. The industry has questions about where all that renovation capital actually came from." Several nearby conversations halted abruptly, attention turning toward them with poorly disguised interest. "Ignore him," Dominic murmured. "He's baiting you." "He's laying groundwork," Sophia corrected, another contraction building. "This isn't impulsive. He's been planning this." Her instinct proved correct 30 minutes later as she took the stage to present the sovereign model. From her elevated position, she could see Victor moving through the crowd, whispering to key industry figures, passing what appeared to be documents. By the time she reached her 3rd slide, detailing the financial benefits of ethical management practices, a distinct undercurrent of skepticism had rippled through the audience. "Questions before I continue?" she asked. One hand braced against the podium as another contraction, now just 6 minutes from the last, threatened her composure. Victor's hand shot up immediately. Without waiting for acknowledgement, he stood, his voice projecting through the ballroom. "I find these numbers fascinating, considering the sovereign's history," he said, holding up documents. "I have here financial records showing consistent losses over 3 quarters, followed by a miraculous recovery coinciding with Mr. Russo taking a more active role in operations." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Victor continued, gaining confidence. "What's particularly interesting is the pattern of cash infusions, nearly identical to money movement patterns identified in a 2018 FBI investigation into organized crime in the hospitality industry. He paused for effect. An investigation that looked closely at Russo International subsidiaries before mysteriously closing. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Dominic, then to Sophia, waiting for denial or confirmation. In the strained silence, Sophia felt another contraction begin, stronger than before, demanding her attention at the worst possible moment. But as she gripped the podium, breathing through the pain, clarity struck with surprising force. Victor had anticipated many responses to his accusation: legal threats, denial, deflection. What he hadn't anticipated was the truth. "You're absolutely right, Victor," she said, her voice steady despite the contraction subsiding. "The sovereign's financial history is relevant context for our transformation." She advanced her presentation several slides forward, revealing a comprehensive financial breakdown that had not been part of the original presentation. "These are the complete records of the Sovereign Hotel for the past 5 years," she continued, "including the systematic theft of over $380,000 during your management tenure, documented with dates, amounts, and methods." Gasps rippled through the audience. Victor's triumphant expression faltered. "What you're holding," Sophia said, nodding toward his documents, "are the creative accounting records you maintain to hide your activities. What I'm showing are the actual transactions, verified by 3 independent auditing firms." She advanced to the next slide, security footage showing Victor skimming credit cards, altering receipts, accepting envelopes from vendors. The Sovereign's transformation wasn't built on mysterious cash infusions. It was built on eliminating systemic theft and reinvesting those recovered funds into staff development, fair wages, and structural improvements. Another contraction began, but Sophia pushed through, her voice never wavering. It was built on transparency. In the stunned silence that followed, Victor's face contorted with rage. "You're lying," he snarled, advancing toward the stage. "This is slander. I'll sue you and your mafioso boss for everything." "You might want to reconsider that approach," interrupted a new voice from the back of the ballroom. A woman in a crisp FBI windbreaker moved forward, flanked by 2 agents. "Victor Hargrove, we have some questions about certain financial discrepancies that have recently come to our attention." As Victor was escorted from the ballroom, his protests fading, Sophia felt a different kind of pressure, lower, more insistent, the familiar sensation of water breaking. "Perfect timing as always, Miss Martinez," Dominic murmured, suddenly beside her at the podium. "May I suggest we continue this presentation at another venue, perhaps a hospital?" 8 hours later, in a private delivery room that somehow contained more flower arrangements than seemed physically possible, Sophia Martinez held her daughter for the first time. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of determined new life, entering the world with a lusty cry that had made the delivering doctor laugh. "She has your spirit," Elena observed from beside the bed, her normally stern expression softened with wonder. The entire kitchen staff had rotated through visiting hours, bringing homemade food that had made the nursing staff jealous. "And your lungs," added Marco the bartender, who had surprised everyone by bringing a hand-knitted blanket made by his grandmother. Outside in the waiting area, most of the Sovereign staff had maintained a vigil throughout labor and delivery, a family forged through shared purpose rather than blood. Thomas had coordinated shift coverage to ensure the hotel ran smoothly in Sophia's absence. Mrs. Harrison had sent her personal physician to consult on the delivery. As evening settled over the city, the steady stream of visitors gradually ebbed, leaving Sophia alone with her daughter and the unexpected figure who had remained a constant, silent presence throughout. Dominic, standing at the window, his back to the room as he watched the city lights emerge. "You should get some rest," Sophia said softly, tracing her daughter's perfect features with a gentle finger. "The Chicago property needs your attention tomorrow." The Chicago property is running perfectly well under its new management team. Dominic turned, and something in his expression made Sophia realize he'd been giving them privacy rather than seeking it for himself. "Modeled precisely on your recommendations." He moved closer, his customary authority softened by uncharacteristic hesitation. "She's beautiful," he offered, studying the sleeping infant with the same attention he might give a balance sheet, analytical, yet somehow reverent. "Would you like to hold her?" Sophia surprised herself with the offer. Dominic looked genuinely startled, perhaps the first time she'd seen that expression cross his face. "I don't think—" "It's not complicated," she assured him, already shifting the sleeping bundle toward his awkwardly positioned arms. "Support her head. There." Something transformed in Dominic's expression as he held the tiny life, a subtle shift that most would miss, but Sophia had learned to recognize. The calculation that perpetually ran behind his eyes quieted, replaced by something simpler, more fundamental. "What will you name her?" he asked, gently swaying in the instinctive rhythm that seems hardwired into all who hold newborns. Sophia had considered many options throughout her pregnancy, but watching Dominic, the unlikely ally who had helped her rebuild not just a career but a future, the answer crystallized with perfect clarity. "Vera," she said softly. Dominic looked up, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Truth." "It seemed appropriate," Sophia replied with a tired smile. "Given everything." 1 year later, the Sovereign Hotel hosted the International Hospitality Ethics Conference in its newly renovated Grand Ballroom. Sophia Martinez, executive director of Russo Hospitality Group's North American division, delivered the opening address with practiced confidence, her tailored suit a far cry from the waitress uniform she'd worn 2 years before. In the front row, Elena beamed with undisguised pride, while beside her, Thomas took meticulous notes for the 3 additional properties now under his regional management. Marco stood at his customary position near the entrance, watchful as ever, though his demeanor had softened with time. And in the back of the ballroom, barely noticeable unless you knew to look, Dominic Russo sat with Vera on his knee, the 1-year-old solemnly offering him a partially eaten cookie, which he accepted with equal solemnity. The fundamental transformation of the Sovereign wasn't about new furniture or improved amenities, Sophia was saying, her voice carrying effortlessly through the packed room. It was about transparency, about seeing clearly and being seen. On the screen behind her, images of the Sovereign's evolution played, before and after photographs of physical spaces, but also staff photos showing the human transformation. The final image showed the VIP lounge where Dominic had once watched through one-way glass, now featuring clear windows that worked in both directions. "Today, I'm pleased to announce the Vera Martinez Scholarship," Sophia continued, offering full tuition and living expenses to single parents pursuing careers in hospitality management. Because talent exists in unexpected places, and sometimes all it needs is an opportunity to flourish. As applause filled the ballroom, Dominic lifted Vera to see her mother on stage. The child's delighted laugh carried clearly to Sophia, who paused mid-sentence to smile in their direction. From opposite corners of a vast room, their gazes met in perfect understanding. 2 people from different worlds who had built something neither could have created alone. Not just a successful business model or an industry transformation, but a bridge between shadows and light where both could exist without compromise. 3 floors below, in the hotel lobby, a framed newspaper article hung discreetly beside the reception desk. The headline read, "Former hotel manager sentenced in fraud case." Most guests never noticed it, too captivated by the Sovereign's renewed splendor. But for the staff, it remained a quiet reminder of where they had begun and how far they had come. And in her small notebook, carried now in a designer handbag instead of a waitress apron, Sophia still recorded her observations each day, not of fraud or misconduct, but of possibilities. Of a future built on the radical notion that truth, when given room to flourish, could transform not just a hotel or an industry, but the people within it. The glass ceiling hadn't just been broken, it had been replaced with something stronger, transparency that worked in both directions, allowing light to reach even the darkest corners.